Hi there, welcome back for another video here with me, Jennifer Kirk, on my YouTube channel. And today we're going to be doing a box opening and review, and this is an item that I picked up second hand, but there are a good few of them about, so it's well worth looking out at your local model shop for things like these, if it's what you're into. But without further ado, let's take a closer look. What we can see here is this is one of the Hornby Super Detail Class 8 diesel shunters. Now, Bachmann as well do have their Super Detailed diesel shunter out, Class 8, which they've actually had out for longer. And a lot of people at the time, when Hornby brought out their own version, thought, well, is the market really big enough for two of these? But in terms of how numerous the class were, there were somewhere over 1,000 built of the Class 8, Class 9, 10, 11 and 12. So there was an awful lot of these, and over the years they've carried an awful lot of different liveries. So I believe that there is room for both types of diesel shunter. And what we've got here is, we can see the catalogue number on there, R2590 BR060 diesel electric class 08 locomotive, and this is running number 08528, which was ostensibly the BR blue with the tops number and the double arrow on it. But it's in the slightly more customised later liveries, where a lot of depots tended to have kind of pet locomotives and they would do their own little embellishments on them. And this particular locomotive, it was regularly allocated as the Liverpool Street Station Pilot, and this would have been through the 1980s, I guess. And as such, they kind of had a personality of their own and tended to build up quite a following with spotters and railway workers alike. So it's nice to see that Hornby have been bringing some of these slightly more eye-catching models to market. Now, unlike Bachmann, Hornby have not released anywhere near as many different versions. Bachmann have kind of sweated their Class 8 model, and it is a good model. I do own quite a few of them, but a lot of people have asked, well, which would you say is the better of the two? And in all honesty, this is what I have to say about that. The Hornby is a slightly better model. There's not a huge amount in it, but if you were to pick between them, the Hornby model has a greater level of finesse. And the main areas where this shows up are in terms of the cab internals, the connecting rods as well, much finer on the Hornby model. There's somewhat extra amounts of separately applied detail in the brake under rigging, things like that. And then one of the things, I'm just going to look for a pen just to help me to do this, but the cab side doors are sprung. I'm just going to see, you can just about see there. And this model dates back to the time when sprung cab doors was a bit of a gimmick that Hornby went in for. And I don't think it adds anything. I mean, you're not really going to be able to do an awful lot with that, although it has been suggested to me that if you shave a very thin piece of sprue, you can kind of use it like a wedge underneath to wedge one of the doors open. But it's really splitting hairs on that, and I think it was detail for the sake of detail back when manufacturing in China was quite cheap. And I wouldn't be surprised if when Hornby come to try and reduce some of the costs, things like opening cab doors quietly get updated to not open anymore on some of the models. I know the Class 50 and the Class 31 also have cab opening doors, and I suppose with the rise of prices, Hornby are probably regretting putting some of that extra money into things like that. But the model itself, it's a really good rendition of the venerable Class 8 diesel shunter. Now, at face value, these all look fairly similar in terms of the base model, But actually, there's a lot of detail differences between different members of the class, and usually it falls to these battery boxes, auxiliary boxes along the side of the body in the main. And Bachmann in particular, the way that they've tooled up their model, it gives quite a lot of variety that they can give in the arrangement of these different boxes for the ancillary equipment. And I haven't been able to compare the Hornby models with each other extensively because I only have 4 of them and they all appear to be the same, but I stand to be corrected if Hornby have tooled up to represent the different arrangement of boxes on the side. In terms of embellishments, there wasn't an awful lot on this particular prototype. It carried the Liverpool Street Station Pilot wording on the side, and that was possibly more to stop other crews from pinching the depot favourite locomotive. I mean, these Class 8s were pretty well travelled and were used for shunting in the main, but also they worked some local trip workings, very short trip workings, as well as engineers' trains, so they could be pinched for all manner of different tasks. So by having that stenciled on the side, it kind of stamped a badge of ownership on them. The only other real embellishment is the grey cab roof, and this may have been down to as much as to stop the sun in summer from heating up the cab too much. I think these locomotives would have probably spent a great deal of time sat on the end of a siding or up against the buffer stops, and in summer with the sun playing down on it, it could have made it quite a hot workplace environment. So that may be one of the reasons that the roof was painted in a lighter colour. But it does make these stand out, and a lot of the Bachmann rail blue models that I've got just have a plain blue cab roof. So it does make this model a little bit different. In terms of finishing, the text detail on there, not just the Liverpool Street Station Pilot, but the other lettering too, which really, with my eyes that are really struggling with age, it has to be said, I really struggle to read all of these, but the tempo printing is so clear and crisp that I've got every faith that these are going to be perfectly legible under magnification, and it's an area that all manufacturers are excelling in. And some might argue that really, what's the point of detail to that level? But I suppose it's a nice touch, and as we've found before on this channel, very occasionally you can find a little Easter egg buried away in there with some little message that slipped through quality control. In terms of other details on here, the wasp stripes are really clearly finished. Now, I remember when locomotives first started coming in model form with wasp stripes, and you used to get a lot of overspray and fuzziness between the yellow and the black, and there's none of that here. It really is crisp, both at the front radiator grille end, and if I swing this model round on the back cab end, although I'm looking very closely there, it has to be said that there are a few little errors on the yellow, and actually, I'm looking at that, it looks to be that the model has been painted black as a base colour, and then the yellow of the wasp stripes has gone on over the top. But there does actually, on this example, seem to be ever so slight fuzziness on the periphery of the wasp stripes, and there's a patch just there underneath the right side window as you see it before this band across, which is actually, I think it's conduit or an angle piece to give the cab rigidity on the prototype. There's just a little bit of fuzziness there, so actually hasn't quite lived up to the standards that I've seen on my other 3 examples from Hornby, but it is very subtle. So I don't think it detracts too much. All the buffers on this model are fully sprung, and they feature the turned brass metal heads that pretty much is standard with all the new Super Detail Hornby models. The buffer beams as well are painted in red, again another slight variant with the Class 8 shunter. A lot of the rail blue examples had either black or yellow buffer beams, so the red, really harking back to the earlier days of British Rail, tended to be a depot applied embellishment. The connecting rods are in yellow. I have seen them turned out with black and red connecting rods too, but this particular example faithfully features the yellow. And we've got a multitude of what appear to be wire handrails on the various access hatches on the side of the body. And this is an area where the Hornby model is head and shoulders ahead of the Bachmann model. The Bachmann one has plastic body side rails, and they tend to be very prone to getting a bit of damage with handling. So these metal ones have much greater resilience to prodding and picking this model up. In terms of radiator grilles, they are really nicely done. We've got the dark colour inside, and rather than just being painted on representations, there is a feeling of a three-dimensional depth into these, which is really nicely done. To an extent, there's the same as well on the radiator vanes at the front, but all in all, a really good model. I'm just on the back here trying to get an angle where we can sort of see into the cab. It's very difficult. Unfortunately, the camera has difficulty in seeing what the naked eye perhaps can. So maybe you'll just have to take my word for it that the interior of the cab on the Hornby model is full depth and it is pretty well detailed. For an area that you wouldn't normally see, that does show a great attention to detail. And it does mean, just as an aside, that if you want to have a go at making yourself a Class 13 model, which was a master-slave, cow and calf, almost a double Class 8 with a cut-down cab on the slave unit, then the Hornby model is widely regarded as being the only model to work from, as the Bachmann model suffers from having a half-height floor. It's got a moulding halfway up the cab height on the inside, which makes it almost impossible to use as a base model for a Class 13 conversion. The wheels on the Hornby model are slightly finer than the Bachmann version, and on the underside, it has to be said, if you want to take this model apart, the Hornby model couldn't be simpler. There are 4 screws, there, and there. You undo these and the entire top just slides off, revealing an 8-pin DCC socket. And as well as that, Hornby has now announced that they will be selling the Class 8 TTS chip as a separate accessory item, so it's now possible to quite quickly and easily, once these hit the market, to sound convert your Hornby Class 8s with the minimum of fuss. I wouldn't like to try doing a sound conversion on the Bachmann Class 8. They don't really have a lot of room inside, and also when I've had to dismantle one in order to repair the cab glazing, it was the devil's own job to both get it apart and put it back together again. So really, it is quite pleasing to find that the Hornby model does not suffer from any of those foibles. The couplings are standard slimline tension lock couplings held in NEM pockets. They can be removed and the pockets themselves can also be unscrewed. So there's plenty of scope to fit this model up with a variety of different couplings should you so wish to do. In terms of other body side detailing, well, the rivet detail and the panel gaps are all faithfully reproduced and they're very fine, but still perfectly visible, and it gives a very pleasing model with a real presence to it, which would be a great addition to any model railway. In terms of extra details, there is included in the box a very small packet here of additional buffer beam pipes, fittings, and really you could go to town on a model like this. It would render it unable to really pull trains of its own, but if you wanted to put this into a display cabinet, or if you have some other very subtle means to couple between the locomotive and the rolling stock, then there is pretty much every pipe that this locomotive would have had in the full-size prototype to fit yourself. And they're all nicely finished here with a multiple of colours. So we've got the yellow-ended jumpers, the red-ended jumpers. They look really nice, and in my mind it's a shame that I'm not going to be able to fit any of these, because this is going to be a working locomotive and I'm going to need to keep the tension lock couplings on either end. The biggest area where I find that the Hornby model loses ground over the Bachmann one is on price. The Hornby models are expensive for what you get. The RRP is now going well over £100, whereas the Bachmann models are still on the right side of three figures. That said, they can be picked up relatively cheaply second hand, but the Bachmann model as well scores highly on a greater number of different liveries, so you're more likely to get the livery you want from Bachmann, but if you can find the livery you want in Hornby, they are well worth picking up. I'd score this a good solid 9.9 out of 10. Well, I hope that was informative to you. Don't forget to like this video and also share it too if you haven't already done so. And subscribe to the channel, ring that bell, and you'll be the first to know about new videos as and when they go up. But it's been really good to have you along. Thanks for watching. And until next time, you take really good care of yourself, and we'll see you again. Bye for now. Today's video has been brought to you in part thanks to the generous donation of my fans on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Mark Anthony, Michael Churchwood, Mark McShane, Bob Threeton, Alec Ralph, Anthony Hunt, and William Wade. If you'd like to help support the show, head on over to patreon.com/Jennifer Kirk. Thank you. Today's video has been brought to you by my books, Bringing Home the Stars, Twinkle Little Star, and also you can get the complete comic collections of All Over the House, Books 1, Books 2, and also the wacky zany Life of Knobty Mouse. Thanks, and catch you later.